Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm alright, not bad. How are you doing, William?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Cool.
Okay, so Alex, my first question is doing doing the freelance journalism. What type of media do you use the most when you do journalism?
Well, what media as in I use Word and I use my laptop, which I have with me, and what I do is I either come up with a story pitch and send it to my contact from the Times of Malta, and if he likes it, then he gives me the go ahead. Or occasionally he sends me stories to do and asks me if I'm interested in doing it. And what I have is Word document, research on the internet or books, or I have a voice recorder if I'm doing interviews on my phone.
Right? And how often do you have interviews or question athletes?
I've never questioned an athlete. Who I have questioned is um, is a doctor, a specialist on asthma, and I've also questioned a bunch of musicians and bands, but I've never questioned an athlete, interviewed an athlete.
Oh, and the editorial meetings. How often do you have to do them, and do they come up as a challenge sometimes?
Well, meaning meaning when I have to do the write up, you're talking about when I.
When you have editorial meetings.
The thing is, I don't think we don't really have editorial meetings. All my dealings is done via email. So what I do is I would if I'm finished with a write up, I would send it to my contact in Times of Malta or my contact on the Circle, and they would usually tell me beforehand what the word length needs to be and what the layout needs to be. For example, intro needs to be you'd introduce blah blah blah, and then the interview that let me know if it needs to be just transcript directly or I need to involve my words more and then bring in the key quotes.
So you never met them personally.
No, I the only time my contact, I mean, at Times of Malta.
The yeah.
The only time I met him was before I did my first story for Times of Malta, and we just had a long chat about how it would pan out and what would be the deal. Like meaning like he would send me an email or I would send him a story pitch, and would communicate via that. So we found out we don't really need to have meetings where we meet in person because we found out everything we need to know first time we met.
Um, and when you're involved in an industry, right? How much involvement in the newspaper industry as a freelancer compared to a full-time journalist?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question because I recently experienced this because I needed to do, well, I wanted to do a story. Um, I can't exactly remember what it was, but I wanted to do a story which which involved a police matter as well. So I sent it to my contact in the Times of Malta, and he said what I'd need to do is I'd need to get her side of the story, this woman who I want to interview, as well as the police station side of the story. And but I wasn't allowed to do that because I am not a full-time journalist. Because when it involves a matter of policing or government issues, usually full-time journalists deal with that.
How often do you do journalism about sports?
Um, I, oh well, I do quite a bit of journalism about sports because apart from being a freelance journalist, I'm also a part-time content writer for fantasy football. So I have to write at least 2 articles a week regarding sports,
Hmm.
football specifically.
And how often? And of uh, which sport of the article do you do the most?
Just because of the because it's just a football site, the one I work part time. It's just football. It's just either football or football gaming, the
Hmm.
fantasy football. It's just there's no other sport involved.
Right. And how often do you work with graphic designers, especially on the same sort of articles such as sports news?
Uh, quite often you need to have a good amount of communication and cooperation with your graphic designer. For example, if I want to do I don't know. if I want to do a story on, let's say, this player from Manchester City, what I would, sorry, that's my train of thought.
Sorry.
Should we keep talking over her? Or?
Yeah, it's fine. You were saying?
You can edit that bit out, right?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Can you just repeat the question again, please?
How much involvement do you have with a graphic designer? How
Oh,
often?
yeah. Well, it's important to have a good amount of communication and cooperation with a graphic designer. For example, I'm doing 2 articles a week, and there's also 2 infographics involved. So if I pick a player on, let's say, Liverpool, and I need to pick the picture, I need to pick the stats, I need to pick the numbers, I need to tell her where they need to be. So that's why the graphic designer and the content writer work in the same office. So we usually communicate verbally, or I can just send her an email. And yeah, it's quite often it's important. And my graphic designer personally, she's very good. She's very good at what she does. So I'm kind of the director, and she does all the work of the infographic.
Oh, I see. And the age rating of athletes of the articles you do. What's the average age rate do you go?
Wow, I never. Thing is, what we usually do is, like, because we write about the Premier League, which is a league in England. If you're doing a story about an English player, they usually do well. If you're doing a story about a young, promising English player, let's say 18, 17, sometimes 21s, early 20s, they usually tend to do well because people like to read about that. But I'd say, but that's not to say we don't focus on foreign players or players who are older, for example, in their 30s. But predominantly, it's usually young. If I'd have to say, average is probably 25, 24.
Oh, 25, 24, no other age rate?
No, we do a wide variety of ages. I mean, we don't pick. It's just usually what makes a good story. So if it's a young player who's doing really well and he's English, then that will usually do good well.
Alright, thank you for your time, Alex.
Thank you, William. Cheers. This was really good.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. So, turn it on.
Okay, finished.